Now on the Amped Up to 11 podcast, adaptive athlete and trail runner Zachary Friedley. Zach is a congenital amputee born missing his right leg above the knee. Zach has spent his life in the pursuit of understanding how to reach the true meaning of movement. This ultramarathoner not only pushes himself physically, but also spiritually. Zach continues to inspire the entire amputee community through his video blogs, social media content, and special brand of wisdom. It is our pleasure to welcome Zachary Friedley. Zach, how you doing today, man? Good to see you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Where are you in the world right now? Because I know you are always on the move, my friend.
Yeah, right now I'm at home in Albion, California, which is about 3.5, 4 hours north of San Francisco on the coast.
Okay. Yeah, and I was doing some show prep, as we call it, the other day, and I was reading some, various articles about you and trying to kind of track your movements. Let's call it like a day in the life of Zachary Friedley. And
Yeah,
it I gotta be honest, man, I was like dizzy. I was dizzy, like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. This
there's
guy's
a
all
lot
over the
happening.
place. I mean, how do
Yeah, man.
you how do you how do you do that? I mean, how do you feel about that? What are you prone to that's something that you thrive on? Like, hey, I like to be moving, obviously, trail runner, you know?
Yeah, I think I'm just living my dream, honestly, and I just wake up pretty charged mostly every day. I mean, there are days like yesterday, I didn't do anything. I didn't have to run. I didn't have to open emails, and I just recharged all day. So I do take my recovery and like my grounding and my downtime very seriously, because without that, I can't do the other, which is super important.
No, I appreciate you saying that because very often, sometimes we get sort of one kind of perspective on people, and we see these really, really active amputees doing these amazing things, and we think, oh, I'm just sitting on my couch today, right?
I did that yesterday. I didn't put on any pants, man, all
I
day.
don't know. No pants, no movement. Today is
Yep.
my
I didn't even put
day.
my leg on.
There you
I
go.
maybe kept my leg off until the evening, and my wife asked me to do some dishes, and I put my leg on for the first time,
Yeah.
like four
Well,
o'clock.
my girlfriend Sarah always knows I'm being a little lazy when I'm using, oh, then I need to have to put my leg on excuse.
Oh yeah,
Can you
I
take
got
care
that
of
one in
that?
my toolkit.
Are you asking me to put my leg on?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does work sometimes. I'm certainly fascinated by you simply because you've um dealt with limb loss your whole life. And
Yeah.
I'm a little new to this, moving into my 7th year here, and I'm always fascinated with the perspective of, the lifers, the guys that and gals been dealing with this situation, this adaptive situation their entire lives. Is there anything that for you that stands out in your mind growing up, let's say, quote unquote, growing up amputee? Is there anything that, you sort of reflect on, maybe a moment when you realize things were different for you, or, something that liberated you in this space when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back, so I was a kid in like the late 80s and the 90s, and I went to the Shriners Hospital to get my prosthetics done, which is like a 4-hour drive from my house in Kansas City, Missouri. And I went there frequently, because when you're a kid, you're growing, legs don't last very long, they're breaking, and maybe the technology wasn't as great as it is right now. I never really thought about it, honestly. It was just normal life, and I think my parents just kind of we didn't talk about it too often,
Yeah.
which I think reflecting back, that could be like maybe not a great thing to like avoid what's going on. but it did produce me to who I am today. And I do a lot of reflection, and there's a lot of times where I have a lot of empathy for myself growing up because I was always like had to work super hard, or my parents were on me all the time. I never got to call myself disabled, none of that stuff. It was just pretty hardcore, man, for like 30 years of my life until I realized a lot of things and did a lot of inner soul searching and was able to maybe make things a little bit easier for 12-year-old Zach.
Yeah. And that's I appreciate you saying that because I hear quite a spectrum of responses when I talk to people like yourself, where some young people are sort of coddled in a way, sort of catered to in a way that might be counterproductive,
Yeah,
where it's not really sort of emboldening them to do great things. Whereas it sounds like maybe depending on what they came from, because there's so many generational differences. The way in which I was a parent, now I'm an empty nester, but the way that I was a parent was so different from the way my parents were parents. And
totally.
and I know people get into this debate about, yeah, we need to go back to the old this and that. And I sort of pause and say, well, wait a minute. The world is different now. There's
Yeah,
different there's different stimulus. There's different things that are sort of coming at kids a million miles an hour that, myself, growing up in the 70s and the 80s, it was very different. It just was a different time. It was a different school of thought. And knowing that your parents made that conscious decision to say, okay, Zach, let's go. Like
yeah,
you need to be on time. Like there is
yeah,
no, honey, do you need, help? Or it was like, no, let's go, man. Let's do your thing. And you were, from what I've read, you were very athletic when you were young as
yep.
well. So I always think, was in any way that a form of liberation for you, or was it just like the next step in like your growth as a person?
Yeah, I mean, for me, sports back then was like a pressure chamber, man. I mean, I was drawn to sports, but I was never um so I wrestled, and I was never the guy putting on mini beatdowns. I was receiving the beatdowns frequently.
Yeah.
But I kept showing up for them and just inching my way towards being better, being better, being better. And it was a slow roll, man. And I just kept showing up. I'm not sure I enjoyed wrestling, but I was somehow drawn to it for 20 years, because I look at my relationship to mountain running right now. I thoroughly love to go out and run. I love the process. I love training. Races are just extra. And wrestling for me, I'm not sure I love practice. I'm not even sure I love competition, but I did it every year.
And it sounds like
Interesting.
maybe that built some foundations in your work ethic in terms of working on yourself
Yeah,
and finding your best self in things. And I tend to be this person that if I do make a conscious choice to do something, I want to be really good at it. Like
totally.
I don't I, and conversely, if I realize I'm not going to be really good at this and I'm coming clean, I tend to just, I'm not going to do it, you know? Um,
Yeah,
and I was really lucky when I was young because I had a lot of foundational sort of skills that were just in my genes with music. And it wasn't really that hard for me. A lot of what I wanted to learn and progress in just sort of came naturally. And certainly I excelled and pushed myself very hard to learn more, to gain more knowledge, to work and perform with people that were way more talented than me, because I always
yeah,
felt like that pushed me higher because I was running to catch up with all these people that I felt were so much better than me. So it really created a lot of laser beam focus for me where I thought, oh man, like I need to be ready for this rehearsal. I need to be ready for this performance. Like, these people are really good at what they do. I want to elevate myself and be as good as them. And
Yeah.
I think that's something, when I look at yourself and a lot of the stories that we're sort of following and then bringing to our platform, it's individuals that are in seek of their best selves, and those paths are very winding.
Yeah.
I know your path has been very winding. I was really captivated, and I want to talk more about um, when the Paralympics became something that was like something that you were chasing. But I don't know. It's just, I feel like with certain people, it's either there, or it's got to be something cataclysmic has to happen for that light switch to go on.
Yeah.
And they say, "Oh, okay, now," because I meet so many amputees, and I'm one of those that really made a conscious decision after amputation to finally really get serious about my fitness level. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I see that a lot, you know, and unfortunately, I also see it go in the other direction, right?
Two
Where,
different spectrums.
yeah, different spectrums. So being active, building that work ethic, fitness, physical, pushing yourself in, let's say, even somewhat of an uncomfortable space. You're dealing with these beat downs and things like that. When did the Paralympics even become like a possibility in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it happened kind of by accident, but also maybe divine like purpose. I aged out of the Shriners and had to find like private care, and found some private care, and they made me some legs, and the legs weren't great. And I remember the guy that was making my prosthetic was like, "Oh, this is just like how you're gonna have to live, dude." And I was like 21, and I didn't like that answer. And I remember going to their website and seeing people running on blades on like the front page or whatever. And I wrote an email to that group and was like, "Hey, just had a leg made by one of your practitioners. He basically said I can't run, and I see your website people are running. What's the story? Like, what's going on?" And they invited me down to their headquarters, and they made some adjustments. I worked with some other people, and then while I was there, they put a blade on me for the first time. I remember them like warning me that it takes like weeks and weeks and weeks of practice. Don't be discouraged. And they hooked that thing up, and I ran within like 5 minutes, and I was flying down the hallway. And then that's kind of when they told me, "Oh, the Paralympics is a possibility. Let's connect you with these coaches." And I'd say that was really like the starting point of my running journey. And that was like December 2007.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, and that's remarkable to me because, being able to run is something that I'm setting those goals now. Um,
Yeah.
I've never, even when I had both legs, I wasn't someone who ran. It wasn't part of my routine. It wasn't something I ever visited. Um, but it's something that I want to do now. And, obviously, um, I sort of gravitate towards stories like yours because, I see what you're doing, you know, I mean, so I'll paint an example of what I'm talking about. I do some hiking. Um, me and my girlfriend, we go to a number of different, national parks and different trails and different things. I do a lot more cycling now than hiking, but I have done, like full day hikes where,
Oh, yeah.
you're getting there 7:30 in the morning and you're probably leaving the park at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night. I mean, you are literally, mapping out like, okay, here's all the trails we're gonna hit. And I'll be honest, man, there's been some days where I'm dying. I mean, I'm grabbing onto things and just pulling myself up. And It's a struggle. So, of course, when I see someone who is running through this terrain, I mean, it freaks me out because I think, oh my gosh. I mean, I just want to be able to jog on a flat surface, right?
Yeah,
So when I start to consider all of what happens in a prosthesis with your residual limb coming from so many different types of weight transferences and pivots and movements and all of those muscles that have to be developed in order to, get to a spot where you're somewhat proficient and you're not feeling as if like every movement is going to result in you like falling down or something.
yeah,
I get overwhelmed is probably what I'm trying to say when I think about it.
yeah, yeah,
And so the going back to the Paralympic thing, obviously you've been pretty transparent. That was something that didn't work out for you, you know?
yeah. Not even
And
close, really. If I think about it.
yeah, yeah, because I know I've read some articles where that was sort of like a flatline moment in your life where you thought, okay,
Yeah,
like now what? And what was
yep.
that emotional set like for you at that time?
I think just personally, I was trying to struggle to figure out who I was and what I was doing with my life, and I think the Paralympic journey was me trying to prove something to myself externally that I was like enough and that I was like strong or something. And even my entire approach to that wasn't the best. It was like a place of anger and like stiffness and like tension. And I failed, man, and never made it. And then like went off grid like right at 30.
Mm-hmm.
Moved around, lived in the woods in California, and then basically had like a reawakening, working with shamans and like going to India, and then found running again, and then this time around it was a lot different. It wasn't as rigid. I didn't really have a goal. Just I wasn't my goal wasn't to be a trail runner or be professional. It was just to move my body
Mm-hmm.
in epic environments and felt freedom. And because of all that, I became the best runner I could possibly become, I think.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more, go a little deeper on the spiritual side, of what you're referring to and how that played a role in you sort of discovering what what I perceive, looking at you from an outside perspective as sort of like this discovery in the concept of movement and
Yeah,
really understanding and being connected to your body.
yeah,
And that's, something that fascinates me because I have had moments when you describe that sort of rigid kind of tension
yeah,
sort of nature that we can experience when we're sort of maybe we're at odds with our body.
yeah,
I
totally.
went through a long period of time. Obviously I wasn't born this way, so I went through this period of time where I felt as if my body had betrayed me. Like somehow I had gotten robbed of something. Like my body didn't like me. It was punishing me. It was saying, you can't do these things anymore. So when you talk about, your travels and meeting with a shaman and going through that process, can you help the listeners understand what that's all about? Because I'm fascinated by all of that.
Yeah, so I work with a guy, his name is Fred Mittauer. He's been doing this type of work for 50 years. I stumbled upon him by, again, one of those like moments that the universe delivers to you. And
Well,
oh, it says I lost connection. Are you still there?
okay.
Did I lose you?
So
I'm
let's,
back.
yeah, let's do this. I had asked you
Sorry,
about the
guys.
shaman. I want you just to
Yeah,
start as if you're answering that question. I think you started saying, I think you said Fred.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll start
So,
right there.
yeah, so just start that whole response over again. And are you good with signal, Brian? Okay.
Yeah, so I started working with Fred Mittauer, who's been doing deep somatic work for about 50 years. And it basically goes into your body where you hold traumatic moments in your life, maybe when you were a kid, maybe things that you don't ever think about. And I think for me, a lot of my journey was unconscious, especially, being born differently. I never really dealt with that in a sense and just kind of stuffed it away. And Fred basically helped me move through some of these things that were stored in my body, a lot of energetics moving through. And we did many, many, many sessions. It was like deep, intensive work. And through that, I started to feel my body differently, had more appreciation for my body, and didn't hate my body and was like gentled with my body. And luckily, I still had running blades, lived in a magical place in Northern California, and started this discovery and running and moving and jumping around, not trying to win anything, just moving because I had a body. And one thing led to the next and became a professional trail runner,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. It's that part of your story just really, really seems like such a huge turning point in this, what I consider for most of us that evolved to that fully formed adult kind of space of, it's all about self-discovery.
Yeah,
It's all about figuring out, I mean, the human condition, right? Why,
100%.
why am I here? Like, what is all this?
Yeah,
And
those are the questions that we ask, and
yeah,
that's exactly the work. And I do got to say, it wasn't like I went there and that was it. I still do this every day of my life. It's never going to end, it's a practice that you get invested in,
yeah,
and you just keep doing the work every day, every week, every month.
yeah. Yeah, and now, given all of the, aspects of this particular sport, and now it would seem to me that some of your endeavors might even be growing beyond yourself in bringing this to the masses, helping others. Um, can you explain to me, where you see all of this going for yourself, or where you hope all this is going for yourself?
Yeah, I think so. Through all this, we started a nonprofit, and it's morphed many different times. But right now, we host this event called Born to Adapt. We've done it in the US, getting ready to do it in New Zealand. So we're going to bring it internationally. And it's basically getting people out in the outdoors, trails, whether they're in wheelchairs, whether they're visually impaired or whatever, whatever disability, just getting them to be invited into the outdoors, feel comfortable in the outdoors, and just kind of removing the taboo about having disabled people in mountains and in outdoor settings. And that's kind of like the grassroots level. And then I'm also at the other end of elite mountain running, essentially trying to put some pressure on these organizations to include adaptive athletes in these races and have a place for people to go be elite, because right now that doesn't exist. Like this past summer, I raced in a race where I was the only person that was publicly disabled. So I raced against able body or non-disabled people, and just create opportunities for people that weren't there for me when I was 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So essentially, just opening up more doors for more people that we may never meet.
Yeah, if there's anything that um I very much want to echo is, man, this community is underserved. Um,
Oh yeah,
get being provided the opportunities and, normalizing what we go through and giving us the pathways that we need to thrive and to feel confident and to be empowered, um, are certainly incredibly worthwhile endeavors. And for you to make yourself available in that regard, and then take what you have created and this momentum that you continue to create and try to place it in the right areas, um, I think is incredibly inspiring. So much of reaching out to you, telling your story is in hopes that we can just, in our own little way, keep nudging that along and keep helping to get the word out about all these really, really important objectives, uh, to get these kinds of resources to, amputees, people with limb differences, um, and that event you were talking about, you know, uh, serving all forms of disability, providing a wonderful space for people just to experience nature. And until I rediscovered cycling, I I didn't even realize how much I had missed being in the outdoors, and
Totally.
it just how connected and just calm and settled I felt the more miles I would log, on my bike, the better I would feel. And there is just something about that. And I struggle to articulate it because it's one of those like, well, you just have to do it. I mean, you just have to be there and experience it and see what that feels like to be in nature, to be your body, to be in movement, out in the world and doing those things. And it's incredibly empowering, um, especially for someone that has gone through an amputation, and if at any point in their life felt, less than because of something that was different about
Totally.
themselves. I want to talk a little bit more in terms of, your trail running, some of the competitive nature of it, and how you manage your limb. Want to talk a little bit about, your hardware. And I know that you've been very forthcoming when I've read about you about saying you got to have the right equipment. Um, very often, at least in my experience and people that I've spoken to, um, they sort of end up with sort of a one size fits all situation, and
Yep.
they quickly realize like, there's a whole bunch of things I can't even do simply because this prosthesis won't allow it. So let's start with your limb care, things like that. I mean, what challenges, struggles do you have, given your residual limb? I mean, you've been you've been with limb loss your whole life. So I want to understand what that's like for you, because obviously this is just the way your body has been your whole life. You're not necessarily managing like a brand new residual limb. So,
Right.
do you struggle in the traditional sense? Like, do you develop a lot of the same types of skin issues or pressure wounds or things like that that some of the newer amputees might say they're dealing with constantly?
I haven't dealt with that stuff in a while. I mean, I've learned a lot in the last decade, especially. I've worked with some of the best prosthetics care you can get. But I am reminded from time to time, like I'll get a memory popped up on my like phone where it says like 3 years ago today, here's a photo, and it's a picture of my residual limb with like a gnarly like raw skin or like just rubbing or red something, and I
Yeah.
haven't had that in about 2.5 years, and I'm pretty sure it's because I've been working with Dave Rotter,
Yeah.
and the stuff that him and I have created together has been game changer. I didn't start seeing him until June of 2022, and so he made me a socket, and I ran that summer with it. So it was brand new types, completely different than what I was. So it took me some time to get used to it.
Yeah.
So this year is the first full year I've been in his socket, and I've had the best racing of my life where I finished a race in New Zealand. Spain, I ran to the Pyrenees, did a sky race, and then I ran 35 miles from Switzerland to France to the Alps in a snowstorm, blizzard, mud, 10,000 feet of climbing, moisture all day. And when I finished, it took me 11 hours and some change. My wife was like, "Hey, how's your leg feeling?" And I was the first time all day where I was like, "Oh, wow. I haven't thought about it." Took my leg off and it was perfect. Not a mark on my limb at all, which any amputee out there would be like, "Holy shit, how?"
They would
You know?
they would expect at least the first couple hundred layers of skin would be gone.
Yeah, nothing. It was perfect. And the
Yeah,
first person I texted while laying on my back in my hotel room was Roder and was like, "Dude, we did it. Like this, you've basically removed that part of the challenge out of my brain
yeah,
to where I wasn't trying to manage skin or manage pressure. It was just perfect all day long."
yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of work. I spent 15 days in Joliet in May working on this leg, and so it's not just like I show up in his office and it's done. Like we work every day for 12 hours on this thing, meticulous, little tiny things that may feel like a piece of sand, but you got to be like, all right, in 35 miles, how's that going to feel? And that piece
Yeah,
of sand will destroy you.
right.
So it's a lot of proactive, a lot of communication, and I'm privileged that I get to work with somebody like him.
Yeah, and ironically, we were talking before the taping today. I also use David Rotter prosthetics in Joliet, Illinois. David has been a godsend for me as well, and has allowed me to do things that I never imagined I would be doing again. Um, Getting the last leg that I got from him, which I'm wearing right now, I can pretty much do it all. I mean, climb. Uh, Although I haven't started running yet, I can run in it, and I can go in water. I could submerge my leg completely in water, and there's you know, this particular rigid socket has an additional sort of like, I guess I'd call it like a rubber type of shell that goes around my residual limb, and then that entire sort of assembly goes into the socket. And I don't know what your situation is as far as
Yeah,
your setup. Is it similar to that?
kind of. So I'm a above knee.
Right.
I have a direct skin fit with a silicone liner that's built into the carbon frame.
Okay.
And outside of the silicone is some foam that's strategically placed throughout the socket to where there's a little bit of cushion, but not too much cushion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I have BOA, a valve that controls a hamstring door, and I have a Velcro that controls lower on the limb. So I have different flexion points that I can
Wow.
adjust, which comes in insanely handy, especially when you're running for 12. When you're preparing for a 12-hour day, your limb is definitely going to change. Everybody's body changes, not just an amputee, but my teammates with on, they run and they'll lose 10 or 15 pounds,
Yeah.
depending on the like conditions. So for me, having that adjustability is huge. And then like I got like these little foam inserts that I'll carry like in my running vest,
Okay.
um, that I can slip in if things start to change, which I utilized for my huge races this past summer. But then I had to take a couple weeks off after that and just kind of chill, let my body recover and my brain recover and my emotional state, because that was a big, huge thing that we did. And during that, I went from like 175 to like 172 or 3, which isn't a lot, but my limb did change. And when I started back in my training block for, like maybe 2 months ago, I could tell that my limb was having a hard time in that socket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of struggles that you have, especially when you have things dialed in that precise.
Yeah.
You got to be meticulous about your weight. And I wasn't. like, I mean, I didn't gain that much, but it still is something that
It's
you have to be
enough.
very conscious of as an amputee,
Yeah, it's
you know?
enough. I agree with you because I've had periods similar where it was really you know, uh 3, maybe 4 pounds, and suddenly I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute. This feels different." And
Totally.
yeah, and it's has nothing to do with volume or fluid. It's no, like even, a few ounces, of additional, cellular tissue, let's call it, is gonna make something feel different. It's gonna change the fit, and suddenly, yeah, you're back to, okay, how long do I have to wait um before my volume can make an adjustment so that this kind of feels right again.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten very spoiled with David's prosthesis, because it's almost like I get up in the morning, put it on, and I go. There is no, like, waiting for the sweet spot to happen, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I experienced a lot of that as a newer amputee, where it was like, okay, well, I guess from 7 a.m. till about 10 a.m., I'm going to be in pain. And then right around 10 a.m., things start to calm down, because
Yeah.
now my limbs sort of adjusted finally. And now
Man.
I can move more freely. But all of that has completely changed for me now, where, I say to myself, gosh, I'm so spoiled, because I've gone an entire day and I've never even thought about, like, my prosthesis at all. And
Totally.
that's, I mean, that's fantastic, you know? I mean, that's where we're trying to get to, because newer amputees anyway will go through these phases where it's like, man, I feel like I'm in a vice, you know?
Yeah.
And it's almost like a constant state of pain. Is that something that you've ever experienced?
Dude, 100%. There's been times in
Okay.
my life where I didn't even know that I was depressed because of it, So if you don't have the right fit, you can't move the way you want, it'll cause severe damage to your mental health.
Yeah.
It's more than just physical. I mean, it goes deep.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's almost that you get conditioned to deal with it, your upbringing, outside stimulus that sort of puts you
Tough
in
it
that,
out.
yeah, tough it out. And then you reach this place in your life where you're able to reflect on what you've been through, and suddenly, you sort of have these like new, or what may have been like residual feelings about what you had gone through. And
Yeah.
I went through a kidney transplant, a leg amputation, and a heart valve replacement, all in the course of about 3 years. Okay.
Wow.
So it was one of these like roller coaster rides of, oh, you're in surgery, oh, you're getting better, oh, you're in surgery, oh, you're getting better. So and this is years ago now, but you know, let's say, I don't know, 8 years later, um, I get bummed out about it.
Yeah.
I actually think about it sometimes, and I actually get sad, almost like I'm mourning now
Yeah.
what happened back then.
That's important. You have a lot of empathy for your past self.
Yeah. Whereas
Yeah.
in that moment, because everyone around me was
Yeah.
falling apart, when your mom's crying, and your kids are crying, and all these things are sort of falling apart, I felt as if I had no choice but just to be strong.
Totally.
And I was always reassuring everyone around me, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And now, oops, I bumped my mic. Now, um, it's like my time to be sad about it, which I
Dude,
find,
that's That's awesome, actually, to
Yeah.
have the awareness to be able to go back in time and
Yeah.
kind of work through those situations.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know? And I think that's why when I was reading about sort of your spiritual journey, I connected with that like
Yeah.
kind of resonated with me because don't you feel like so much of what you're doing now and it's so purposeful there's such a huge spiritual component to that, don't you think?
Yeah, like 100%.
Yeah.
A lot of it for me was like maybe forgiving past versions of myself, having a lot of empathy for my past self, and then also celebrating, 12-year-old Zach, or being on the mountain somewhere and just being that person that maybe that kid didn't have.
Yeah.
So that's helped me a lot.
Yeah. No, it's definitely struck a chord with me and created a sense of urgency about reaching out to you and trying to, you know, get you to commit, which I appreciate you being so gracious. Um I follow your Instagram, you know, pretty religiously, and the content that you develop, I got to say it's phenomenal. Um
Thank you.
it's you sort of excuse me, you sort of take this it's kind of like this documentary kind of format that you're using
Yeah.
where it's almost like, your videos are like almost like these mini docs kind of thing, which I totally dig, and it's so relatable. Who's chasing you around with a camera is my first question.
Yeah, my buddy Evan
Okay.
Staley. He and I met in 2020 when I went to Yosemite during the pandemic to run basically the El Cap Trail and just do some trail running on my own because all the races were shut down. And I met him one night camping, and he's followed me now to almost 5 continents. We'll be on our uh, sixth continent in February when he comes to New Zealand. And he's just been capturing these monumental moments of my life. And he is a very good storyteller, and he sees things differently. And I think I appreciate having that organic person just there.
So yeah, Zach, I appreciate you saying that because I was very much connected to those like mini stories, the way in which it was edited and sort of the tone of it
Yeah,
and the camera work was very captivating and engaging, and it's sort of this peek into your life and
yeah,
sort of watching you but also looking through your lens as well to see, how you're interacting with that community and what you are trying to do, with trail running and wanting to see that grow beyond, bigger than yourself, participating in that and celebrating that. And all of that work, I think is so very important, not only for amputees, but just people, and
yeah,
such a beautiful purpose in that endeavor. How would you want people to reach out to you if someone is wanting to get engagement from you for speaking or just looking for tips and tricks, free advice, so to speak?
yeah, man. Instagram is probably the best way. Zachary underscore movement.
Yep.
Um, and I always tell people I do get a lot of emails coming in and messages, and sometimes I do miss it. My manager's email is on my Instagram, so if something that falls through the cracks, it's not personal at all. Sometimes when I'm in a different country, emails go somewhere else or like into a spam or promotions folder.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to reach out to him. I'm definitely not ignoring anybody. It's just sometimes hard to capture it all and balance it.
Well, of course. And, I'd like to echo that because I've been accused of that too. I'll get this like angry DM, like, didn't you get my email? I'm like, I'm sorry.
Oof. Yeah, emails for some reason, I don't know what it is, but I feel like nothing falls through the cracks typically on Instagram, but sometimes Gmail will just like
Yeah,
the email's there, but it like never popped up, and I'm like, how the heck did this not come through?
I don't know.
You know?
It's above my pay grade. That's all I can tell you. I don't understand a lot of this
Yeah,
stuff. I want to engage it, but at the same time, I don't know if I have the bandwidth to figure it all out. Thinking about people with limb loss or limb difference, I mean, how would you describe what you'd like the world to sort of perceive this community as? I mean, what would what would that look like for you?
just strong individuals, people that deserve opportunities. Um, I think a lot of times people ask me questions like, what's one myth about the disabled community that you want to debunk? And I think it's that these are some of the strongest human beings I've ever met in my entire life. A
Yeah,
lot of people are like, oh, disability is weak, or it's like complete opposite of that. These are resilient human beings that deserve the same amount of opportunities as other people.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and becoming an amputee myself, wanting to connect with people that carried a very specific vibration and brought something to this community that I wanted to somehow draw a little bit of personal strength from. So much of what we're doing with the podcast is about sharing that energy and allowing everyone to share in that and bring that to as many people as we can and hopefully give someone some inspiration, some hope, even if that means just getting up and walking across the room today. That is an accomplishment. And
Totally.
everything that I've witnessed, you know, through stories like you, through my own personal experiences, everything starts in just very, very small increments. Um, but you have to be willing to just try. And
Yep.
it's amazing what can be accomplished. You came away from the disappointment, of pursuing, your Paralympic dreams to only discover that there was so many other things that you were destined for, and now you're living out those experiences and those dreams, and you're choosing to share that energy with everyone around you. um I think that's something that is, it's like part of your legacy as a person. It's
Thanks,
what
man.
it's what people will remember about you. And coming here today, I want to thank you for being here. And we will all be watching and, witnessing whatever comes next. What is the next big goal for you right now?
Well, I just actually just signed a 5-year extension with On, so I'll be on the professional trail team through 2028. So I'm really excited about that. And what that means is I can continue to travel around the world, race in the biggest trail races the world has to offer, but also keep pursuing the Born to Adapt series that we created, which we're taking it internationally in 2024 in New Zealand. So we'll have 2 events next year and hopefully 4 events in 2025, and just keep scaling that event to bring it to places all over the world.
Wow. Fantastic. Thanks again. You are Zachary Friedley. I am Rick Bonkowski. This is the Amped Up to 11 podcast. I want to wish everyone health and happiness, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Zach.